Got it. Oh, he came off. Jeez. Ah, that was fun. What's going on, guys? This is Gene Jensen, and I'm going to show you how to fish a floating worm and when to fish it and the whole 9 yards. One of these little deals that I love to fish, and I don't think I've ever done a video about it. So let's jump on it. Stay tuned. I'm going to try to catch another one. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the rig itself. It's pretty simple. Starts off with a barrel swivel. Barrel swivel is coming off of a fluorocarbon line. You want to have sinking line on this. You can use any type of line, but sinking has always worked best for me. It just helps to pull that worm down and helps to keep it falling the way you really need it to fall. 18 to 12 or 12 to 18 inch leader to a worm hook. What this one is, this is a Gamakatsu G Finesse flipping hook. Lighter wire. It's almost a little heavier wire than I normally fish, but it works great because they're super sharp. Another one I might use is they make a one that's even lighter wire if I can pull it out of my tackle box. This is also G Finesse, but it's an EWG. This is a 2-aught. This is a 3-aught. I don't usually typically go over a 4-aught hook. Okay, tie it on there with an improved clinch knot. And then the worms themselves, the ones I use most of the time are the Zoom Merthiolate trick worms. I'll also use a white and I'll also use a bright yellow, but this is one I use probably 75% of the time. Now, there are periods of time we'll talk about in just a minute where I'll use two other colors, Junebug and Redbug. And that'll be like next week is when I'll be throwing that, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. The way you rig it is just Texas rig. If you have an EWG, you do it like, you do it with, I'll show you that one, what the heck. All right, so all you do is you just Texas rig the worm. I'm using a straight shank hook, so it's a little bit different than the EWG, but same thing, it's just weedless. This thing comes through a ton of cover. Don't let that tip come out on this one, especially when you're using a straight shank hook. The rod itself, now I'm using 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon. The rod is a medium action bait caster. It is very difficult to cast a weightless worm or a fluke on a bait caster. I've practiced and practiced and practiced, and I've got a video I'll link right up here, a real old one on how to cast light lures on bait casters. But I would recommend either a medium heavy spinning rod or a medium action spinning rod, but you're really going to have to set the hook with that medium action spinning rod. So the 3 rods to go through them: a medium fast action bait caster, a medium fast action spinning rod, or a medium heavy fast action spinning rod. And just because it just makes fishing those light lures and casting them a lot easier. So there's 2 different, let's do it this way. When I'm fishing and the bass are super shallow, either when the males are getting ready to spawn, they've moved up, they're making beds, they're really aggressive, this works really great, I'm going to fish it weightless. When they're up shallow and they're garden fry after they've done spawn, I'm still going to fish it weightless. But there are periods of time where they're out 3 or 4 or 5 feet. Maybe they're spawning a little bit later in the season, and they're spawning a little bit deeper because the water's warm down there, or what. It just, if they're a little bit deeper and you need to get the bait down deeper, then what I do, crap, I done messed up my tackle box and everything, dumping hooks out. But in my tackle box, I have a little nail weight, okay? And what you do is you take that nail weight and you stick it right here between the bite of the hook. And I'm gonna show you real close. All I do is just stick it straight down the center, and I'm gonna do it and then show it to you. And I just put it all the way into the center of that worm, but just make sure you don't put it down where the hook's got to go through. And just like that. And so when it sinks just like this. If you put it down in the tail, it'll sink backwards. You don't really want that. You want it to be able to sink and that tail to fall free. You want it to be able to sink horizontally, and it'll just get more bites. So in all honesty, I don't expect to really catch them good today doing this, mainly because they're not quite there yet. When this thing shines the most, and when I love to fish it, is when the bass are garden fry, when they're guarding the bed, and when the males have moved up and started to spawn, and they're actually pushing, trying to get things away from their bed, and you can really get a reaction bite. Now, during the spawn, it is amazing because you may not catch the fish, but when you're looking for bedding fish and you're looking for beds and it's a little bit stained like it is on this lake today, you start jerking this bright thing around and those bass, those males, will come out and they'll flash at it, trying to chase it off. They'll come up behind it and they'll follow behind it all the way to the boat, and you'll be able to locate fish a whole lot better. Yes, you'll be able to catch some, but the cool thing is you'll be able to find, you'll be able to figure out that you're in an area with a bunch of bedding fish or something like that. And it's just a great search bait to be able to do that with. All right, so let's get out on the water and I'm gonna show you guys how easy this thing is to fish. It's basic and it's really good and it catches fish. But before I do that, down in the description, I'm gonna put a link to all the tackle that I use and some suggested rods and reels. They're just gonna be links to Tackle Warehouse. You guys can go check them out. But anyway, let's get out of the water. Let's go have some fun. Whew, it's breezy today. All right, so when do I start fishing a floating worm? Typically, it's when the water temperature gets into the high 50s. I'll fish it from there until it gets into the, I'll fish it all summer long, really. But when it gets up into the high 50s in the spring, the bass move up and they start to get shallow, and that's when this thing really is good. Around cover, you see right here, I've got a lay down right. When the males get done spawning, they'll hide in there and protect their babies. Now, I don't typically like to fish it now. I don't. Back when I was just getting started, it was a blast. But I like to leave the males alone when they're garden fry. But if you catch one, just make sure you put it right back in the water. Still, it's fun to catch them. But I start about in the high 50s, and it's just a jerk pause, and I just work shallow cover is the biggest thing. This lake does not have a lot of shallow cover, which makes it even more difficult. But when they move up and they get up on the bed and they start to spawn, same thing. They'll move up shallow. You can get a reaction bite, you can get them to show themselves or whatever, but it's just one of those things that they will come unglued. Now, when you do get a bite, a couple of things, 9 times out of 10, especially with this nice bright Merthiolate trick worm, you're gonna see the fish bite. The hard thing to do is to not set the hook right away. It's like a topwater bite. They bite it, you see them bite it, you count 1, 2, 3, and then set the hook. Now, when you set the hook, this is critical. When you set the hook, it's not over your head, it's a low sweeping hook set like you would a Carolina rig. 1, 2, 3, and then you're gonna slide it to the side, and you're just gonna low sweeping hook set and set it hard, and you'll catch that fish almost 100% of the time. All right, so let me get this. Man, the pollen is really bad today. All right, so the cadence is pretty simple. It's a pop, pause, pop, pause, pop, pause, and that's all you do, and you're just jerking it, let it come up and then float back down, let it come up and then float back down. Pretty simple, but it's that old jerk pause deal that you do with the fluke. You do it with a worm, and I'm trying to throw myself out of the boat, so I'm not paying attention to what my trolling motor's doing. But and this is one of those baits, you don't have to be in a boat. It's great when you're bank fishing. That's when I learned it, was when I was bank fishing. It's a blast. It's weedless, it's snagless, it'll come through anything when you rig it right, and it's just fun to fish. Man, I hope there's a fish back up in this pocket because it's ideal, but they just have not been on it. And that's another thing, they're either on this thing or they're not. Make 100, 150 casts with it. If you're not getting bit up in the shallows, put it down and try something else, but the fish will let you know pretty quick that they want to eat it. And like I said when I was sitting down, I don't expect to catch any fish with it today because I don't think they're going to be on it. But it is one of those things I'm going to try. Now, as it gets into the summertime, you're looking for shallow cover. This is really good technique when you're around beds, around spawning bluegill. You know, you get those bluegill, they move up. Let me turn this around. the bluegills move up and they start making beds and they start to spawn, and the big bass hang out around those spawning beds. This is an ideal time to do it, but that's when I changed to more natural colors. Redbug and Junebug are my two favorite colors to throw around bluegill beds. But it's the same thing. You throw it and you just jerk, jerk, pause, and those largemouth bass will come unglued. I've caught giants around bluegill beds. The shallower the better. You'd be surprised. You'll see the bluegill beds, you start looking around and you're like, there is not a bass in sight. You start popping this thing around the outside edge of those bluegill beds and you're gonna find a big bass. It's just whether or not you can catch them and get them in is another thing, but it is an absolute, I love it. Now, if you're fishing it on a spinning rod, say a medium heavy or a medium spinning rod, I know I said 12 to 15 pound test, 10 to 12 on a spinning rod. 15 seems to be a little bit too thick and it isn't very manageable with a spinning rod. It has nothing to do with the bass, it has nothing to do with the rig or anything else. But when you're on a spinning rod, it just tends to be a little bit more difficult with the thicker, heavier line. So 12 is about max that I would do when I'm fishing with a spinning rod. I've got 15 on here, and that's just because it's a bait caster and it's a lot easier to manage that heavier line. Like, Jordan forgot what a bite felt like. No, he's on it again if you want to set it. Oh, I thought it was moving sideways.
I felt it and I was dragging. I'm like, what the heck? And I just left it, and then
all right, so I want to show you the cadence again with me, with where you guys can see me do it. So the way, most of the time, the way, unless they're really on it and they're really aggressive, the colder the water, the slower you want to, or the longer you want to pause and the slower you want to fish it. So say if I was fishing high 50s, low 60s, I'd literally pop, and let it sink out of sight, pop, and let it sink out of sight. And I would just fish it super slow, not quite as aggressive. And as the water temperature gets up into the 60s and up into the 70s, you start getting a little faster, a little bit more aggressive with it. Jerk, pause, let it sink, but I still want it to sink out of sight. I figured this out when I was learning how to fish a spinnerbait. For some reason, I always get more bites right at that spot where your bait disappears in the water. When I'm fishing super shallow, and it same holds true with a floating worm. So I let it sink out of sight and go pop till I see it again, pop until I see it again, and I just let it sink back down. Now I still got the nail weight in this one. It takes longer to sink, and you could fish it a lot slower if you didn't have a nail weight in it. And as for the weight of the nail weight, smallest one I got, you know. And what I used to do instead of going and buying nail weights is I used to take and get a coat hanger, an old heavy wire coat hanger, and cut little pieces off of it, cut it into a bunch of pieces, put that in my tackle box, and I'd use that as nail weights. Hey, little snag, you snagged again?
Yeah.
Oh, little snag is snagged again. Hold on a second.
Come on now.
All right. So now, if you are in a boat, I'm gonna front end you real quick. If you are in a boat, you want to have your boat as close to the bank as you feel comfortable. You want to cover that shallow water depth. And I love covering water like this, especially when I'm by myself and I'm not front-ending my guy in the back of the boat. But throw right up against the bank, pause, fish it fairly fast, and you can stay on the trolling motor and just cover a ton of water and just find those aggressive fish and catch a lot of fish. That is the basics of fishing a floating worm. It's one of those things that you guys are really, you gotta get out there and try this. It's a blast. And don't be afraid of these bright colors. Also use a bubblegum trick worm. I forgot about that. But bright colors are the best when you're covering water. When they're around bluegill beds, try something more natural with some flash to it, and you'll be fine. And you'll catch fish. I guarantee it. So that's a floating worm, guys. Like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water. Go out and catch some fish and have a great day. We'll see you.